Hey Max, welcome again to the podcast.
Ciao, Fran. Thanks for having me again. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. So today the topic is cross training. How to incorporate it into your preparation. There is different types of cross training with different purposes, and we will try to give you an overview of what we think is useful, what is our experience, what science says, and how you can benefit from adding more cross training to your running, to your normal training, basically. So maybe let's start introducing like the basic definitions. Cross training, like we refer to as everything that is basically non-running, but it's still training. And I would probably divide this huge category of activities into two main ones. One is like strength-based cross training, meaning everything that is focused on developing your strength, which is, you can do it in the gym, you can do it when you're climbing, for example, in many different ways. And the other type of cross training that is just as common as the other one is like aerobic or endurance based cross training. And of course, the two most classic examples are cycling and swimming. They're probably the most common for runners. I should probably also mention skiing because right now it's winter here in Europe, and a lot of ultra runners especially are skiing, especially ski mountaineering, which is like one of the best endurance activities that you can do for cross training, even if you are a runner.
Yeah.
Also
and fun
too.
Yeah.
So I think everything can kind of falls into those categories with some overlaps, of course, because it's not that if you're skiing, you're not doing strength work, for example, when you go up and down, when you're skiing on a downhill. But it's like, I would consider it more like endurance and aerobic based than specifically strength. So what do you think, Max? And is there anything you wanted to add to this little introduction?
Yeah, no, I think you basically said everything correctly, or I agree with everything you said. I do have to maybe do a disclaimer that I'm a big fan of cross training. And I don't know if that is because I'm getting older or because I've been running a lot the last 10 years, and now I often enjoy doing other stuff too. But I do think that overall, most people will get benefits out of, some chance maybe instead of going for an easy run, doing something else when it comes to cross training. And I'm saying this on a physical level, but also on a mental level, especially if you have been training for a specific goal for a long period of time. So yeah, I'm a big fan of cross training.
Yeah, thanks for introducing that. It's super important. There's two levels, the physical side and the mental side. They're equally important in running and training in general. And that's like the reason why cross training can be so useful to add to your training if you're not already doing it. Because the main reason why we run, why we train, is to feel good, to have fun. But up to a certain point, like if you run too much, you're probably gonna have a hard time having fun.
Yeah,
it's normal, even if you love it so much and it's an activity that you really enjoy. Sometimes it's important to realize the need to take a break, physically and mentally, and cross training is a chance to keep active and taking that physical and mental break that you need.
I agree. And maybe also too, what I would like to add there, it's like, I realize that for some people, they look at cross training as the thing they do when they are injured and they can run, which is different from my approach, maybe your approach, that it is, do cross training as a way to complement your running. So for me, it's not about being injury in order to start doing cross training, even though of course I do more cross training if I can run, because that's just logic. But what I'm saying is basically if you have a more holistic approach to your training, you can, add cross training as a way to enhance your running experience, and even improve your, endurance and your aerobic capacity.
Oh yeah.
And depending on the type of cross training that you do, it can even help you out with different stuff, when it comes to physical, aspects of it.
Yeah, completely agree. There are so many good examples of athletes taking advantage of cross training and being really, really successful. And, related to cross training as a recovery or as a part of your normal training, I think it completely changes the approach. Like if I have to go for a bike ride when I'm injured, that I feel like I have to do this session,
they're
it's
forced
so
to do it,
hard.
yeah.
Like, it's so hard to just get started and go out maybe in the cold, and feeling like you have to do it. Well, if you're, for example, if you use the bike for a recovery day, you have after a hard session, so you don't want to put too much stress on your legs, for example, I'm just looking forward to it. I just want to go out and ride for a couple of hours and just enjoy
the experience of it.
experience of it. Yeah, the feeling that I get. And it's the same thing, but it's a completely different approach. So that's why you can definitely benefit from cross training, like regarding like the overall experience of training, feeling good while you're out there and feeling better while you're running. That's really, really important. Maybe like I should also mention that from a scientific perspective, the body is not really able to differentiate too much between different sources of stress. It doesn't really know if you're out running or cycling or skiing or whatever. Of course, it's a little different, but like at the cellular level, you're basically stressing the metabolic stress that you're putting your body under is pretty much the same. So for a metabolic purpose, it's very important to understand that like any activity can be considered training, can work for the purpose that you're using it, whether that's strength based or it's again endurance or aerobic based. And that's something important to realize, because sometimes for training you just need to turn the engine on and do the metabolic work that is useful for your body, your organism, not just running, not pounding on your feet and your legs and your tendons that eventually they might go under too much stress sometimes if you're running too much, for example. So it's another cool thing to realize, and it's the science that is telling us. So
I think a practical way to kind of see that example, or maybe see in the real life what you are saying, I think it's the case with some triathletes, in the way that, for example, most of them will train, let's say 20 to 25 hours a week, meaning swimming, biking, and running. But then are usually running, less than 100 kilometers a week, some of them even less than 80 or 60. But then when it comes to doing an Ironman, they can, break a 3 hour in the marathon, quote unquote, easily. Then you have people who trains up to, 120, 130, 140 kilometers a week, meaning 80 miles a week, and they are not able to break 3 hours on the marathon. So, of course, in order to get good at running, you need to run. But as Frank was saying, your body just knows about stress, and I guess this also applies to the concept that we really push in Vert about like how it is important to measure your trainings by time spent on feet and basically your perceived rate of exertion, which is basically how hard you feel you're going on a specific session. And all of those stuff in the end will help you, becoming a better runner and achieving your goals. So it doesn't matter, quote unquote, if you did it swimming, if you did it biking, or if you did it, running. In the end, all that will help you to reach your potential,
Yeah. You know what? One other really classic questions that we get from our athletes is like, can I substitute this session, this easy run, with a a bike ride or another cross training session? And my answer is generally, yeah, of course. Why not? You're still putting in the work. That's what we're mainly interested in. We're not looking at achieving a certain mileage every week, even though it's important to understand that we're runners, we need to run and we should not forget about it. But if it's just 1 or 2 sessions per week that you want to substitute with any kind of cross training that you enjoy, that's great. It can work even better than just going out running and forcing it if you don't feel like it, for example.
Yeah. And from all of the sports that you have mentioned, you have to say also that running is the hardest for the body because of the impact, that goes with running. And overall, running is a hard sport. If you are starting to run, you will figure it out pretty quickly that, running a mile, running 2 miles, running 3 miles, and going fast, it's super hard, especially if you are not used to it. Just the whole motion of it just breaks you down. So if you compare that going for a swim or going for a ride or even doing a backcountry session with skiing, which is usually pretty pleasant, it's way easier for the body to do those activities in compared to just running outside.
Yeah, I do agree. The entry level is quite high compared
Super high.
to other activities. So yeah, especially if you're like a beginner, it may be pleasant, important, enjoyable to include different types of cross training on top of your weekly mileage.
And sorry, other thing that maybe you didn't mention at the beginning that I do feel it is important when it comes to start running and even starting doing trails, it's the ability to mix running with walking or hiking. I think is also great. It's applicable to what you would probably ended up doing in your race anyway, meaning hiking up a hill. And that is also another way to kind of reduce a little bit the impact. You will still be having impact because hiking, it's a lot similar to running in some ways, but at the same time, it will help you out, kind of lowering a bit your heart rate, lowering a bit your rate of perceived exertion, and at the same time will allow you to, extend a little bit the duration of your session. So that's another good tool that applies well to the trail runners that are starting with the sport.
Yes, I would generally put hiking in the same category as running because you're still having some impact on your legs, your feet, your joints, and everything. Basically to me, cross training is everything that is like non-impact, like doesn't have a pounding on your feet. Think about when you're cycling or if you're swimming, for example, you basically have like zero gravity. Like, of course, if you're swimming, you're just floating. If you're cycling, of course, your legs are working really hard sometimes, but you don't have the pounding that you get from running or walking, for example. And then the other consideration that I was making is that, trail running is called running, but it's not necessarily running all the times. Walking is definitely encouraged and suggested in different circumstances. So that's why I don't like to distinguish, to tell apart, to put one on one side and the other activity on the other side. Basically. Let's cover a little bit the purposes of cross training. Like, why is it beneficial in different circumstances? I think the two main ones can be traced down to recovery, and then alternative training for especially endurance and strength. Because I think there are a few non-negotiables, running specific workouts that you'll still need to do in your microcycle or weekly routine or whatever. But for other types of session, which are usually, endurance or strength based or for recovery, it's generally a good idea to use cross training. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, coming back to the mental side of things, if you are starting with a sport, it can be super hard to just start a week thinking that you have to go out and run, let's say 4 or 5 times a week. So you can always help you a little bit with kind of splitting that in. Oh, maybe I will go for, let's say, 2 or 3 runs a week, and then I will just ride my bike for another 2 times, and that will probably make you the still benefits of having 5 sessions a week, but it wouldn't be the same mentally and physically, especially again if you're starting and you have to like build that even muscular and skeletal type of structure in order to kind of endure running. So that's another important thing that you consider probably if you are starting.
Definitely, yeah. And the specific benefits, for recovery, cross training is generally less stress on the body. Also because I think in general, a lot of runners tend to run too hard sometimes, especially on their recovery days. So with cross training, sometimes you are able to actually lower that intensity, because maybe you're less experienced or you just take it easier. You're out there and you enjoy it, and you're still doing the work. You're still turning on the engine. You're still giving your body the metabolic stimulus that it needs. So on one hand, it's less impacting, but on the other hand, it's probably even more beneficial than running sometimes. And then I think it's also important to mention that, especially with some activities, skiing is a great example. It develops like the multidisciplinarity that is always good to have, like not always training the same muscles, basically, not always running. You need to sometimes give those muscles some rest, and doing different activities also develops coordination and specific abilities that are, of course, specific to other sports, but then they transfer to running and they're applicable to some specific situation, and in the end they make you a better athlete. I think that is important.
Like, for example, to point out two maybe examples to that is when you are out there, doing a backcountry skiing session or like a ski session, that kind of helps you understand a little bit your environment, and like even kind of knowing a little bit to how to read in between lines when it comes to the type of terrain, the incline, and how you kind of be more efficient at moving in those type of terrains, and that actually can translate well to doing trails and ultras. And then, for example, when you are out on a long bike ride, you have all this nutrition component when it comes to bike ride. For example, it's way easier to consume calories on a bike ride than on a long run. And you can start applying that on a bike ride, maybe trying different stuff, tweaking a little bit, how much do you eat or how often do you eat? And then you can translate that to a long run without the kind of the first impact of trying it, on a long run, which may potentially, cause you having some, GI stress issues and stuff like that. So maybe some things are not super directly linked, or some of them are, but at the same time, as you mentioned, I think there are always things that you can take away from a cross-training activity that will translate eventually to how you are performing well running on the trails.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I think it can be important for this reason sometimes. And even, team sports, basketball, soccer, or volleyball, whatever, sometimes people just think about, individual activities as cross training, but they can also be great as long as you don't get hurt, of course. Maybe soccer sometimes presents some little risks of injuries. And like every time I play soccer or basketball, I feel really awkward, but I know that I'm doing it, something useful for my coordination, and even the way I visualize the field, the basketball pitch, or like people running around me, I think it helps with coordination and multidisciplinarity that I was mentioning before.
Yeah, I agree.
Over specialization is important, and at a high level is of course necessary, but even the top athletes are still maintaining some different stimuli, especially in some parts of their season that are non-running specific, and that is probably really good. What makes them excel at what they're doing sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
There
so
are
it's
plenty of good examples of like super good trail runners that do a lot of cross training even during the winter, or even like in between races and stuff like that, or recovering after a higher effort and stuff like that. So
exactly,
it's basically like if it is working for them, it will probably work for you too.
exactly. Yeah, this opens up a whole new topic that I wanted to talk about. What the best athletes are doing. There is definitely inspiration that we can get from them. From two main aspects, I think. One of them is like how they're adding cross training to their season, like the microcycles that they're doing. And another one is like how cross training fits into their microcycles. And the concept of micro and microcycles is what we were talking about with Daniel in the previous Coach Lab podcast. So if you want to find out more and understand the concept, this really basic concept of training, I really suggest you listen to these two great conversations. But basically, for the microcycle, like, okay, you're planning your season with your race and your goals, and you're also planning periods of intense specific training, but also recovery. And this is like the macro view of your season. The micro cycle is like this longer period where you try to add all the ingredients that are basically useful to achieve your goal. And cross training can definitely be a part of both. Coming back to the top athletes, typically a lot of ultra runners we're seeing right now, Killian, John Albon, Petter Engels skiing in Norway, even Jim, he used to be a runner all year round. Now he's training with the skis in the winter. This is probably really good for ultra running, and it's part of their training microcycles, meaning that their winter block is focused on cross training, on long ski days, lots of endurance, a lot of elevation on skis, which basically translates into a really good strength work. So, it's a really important part of their foundation for what they want to focus on in the summer, which is, of course, ultras, or generally speaking, trail races.
I feel
even,
like
go ahead.
I feel like in Europe, most of the guys and girls have it figured out way better than in the US, because in the people tend to run the whole year. And I guess for the average person that takes a bit of a break in between goals, it's okay. But like if you are a gym, and you are racing hard in January or February, and you want to be competing hard again in June and July and August, and even up to October or November, that ends up being maybe too much. And sometimes, or maybe you can get away with it for a couple of years, but eventually it will get to bite you, And in that regard, a guy like Killian, for example, who has been cross training, quote unquote, which I guess for him is not cross training, it's just like the way he does stuff. He's been doing schemo for the last 15 years during his winter, and we don't have to say how well that has worked for him. And for sure there are other guys, even like Francois also, it's like a very big into like cross training, even into their season, like doing long bike rides and stuff like that. I feel when it comes to especially running ultras, and long ultras, like the benefit of doing cross training during your preseason will translate really well for what you would like to do during the winter, during the summer, sorry. So we are not like reinventing the wheel. We are just kind of following what all of these great athletes have already been doing for the last 10 to 20 years. So
Yeah. Yeah, great point. It's also important to point out that they're still maintaining some running on a weekly basis.
yeah,
Even the fast guys that are competing in the Schemo World Cup. I'm thinking about Remy Bonnet or Davide Magnini, for example. If you go under Strava, for example, you can notice they're still doing maybe 2 or 3 runs every week. And so is Killian, and so is Jim that I was chatting with, a few weeks ago.
yeah. You have to keep
yeah,
some sort of baseline, I think,
of course,
just to give the mechanics and just to make it easier to transition to the spring when it comes, to doing more running.
Yes. It used to be a different, because it used to be like Schemo season and running season used to be very separate. And like especially in the first 2-3 weeks, the Schemo athletes usually struggled a lot in their training, in their transition to running. Now it's not like that anymore, and we're seeing it in the first races of the year where they're usually performing
good to go
really
from
well.
the gun.
Yeah, because they have such a good endurance and strength base from the winter. They just need to add a little bit of running to develop a good economy and just a good gesture, and then they're just ready to crush it. Another example that I was thinking about is Adam Peterman, who used to be a runner, full-time runner. Now he's actually adding a lot of cross-country skiing into his training. Since he started doing like longer ultras. He won Western States last year, of course. He also won the World Championship, and we're seeing him on skis all the time in this part of the season. So
which is wise from him.
Yeah, definitely.
So that speaks burning out.
Yeah, it speaks about the importance of cross training and how you can take advantage of it related to your training microcycle, like to your general planning of the season. And then you're actually also seeing a lot of athletes adding cross training to their basically typical week of training, like their microcycle. Typically that is used for recovery, because the closer you get to race day, the more specific training gets. So of course you want to do your long runs, your workouts, your specific uphill and downhill and flat workouts for trail running, for the type of race that you will be doing. But a lot of athletes for cross training, for recovery after a hard session or a race, are using typically the bike, in the summertime, for example. There's a few others who might like swimming. There's also
rollers.
Some athletes that like that. Some athletes are using climbing and scrambling as a type of strength work, which I think is very interesting, because it's even more specific to trail running and sky running sometimes than going to the gym. So there's different ways you can fit your different types of cross training into your typical microcycle or generally training week.
There's people also that goes to the gym and hits the elliptical or even the rowing machine. I guess it also depends on where you live and what are you able to get on with, because I get that not everybody has the chance to just go for a long bike ride during a week, for example, because they live in a crowded city, or like they don't have enough time to do it. So maybe for them, just going to a gym and just do 45 minutes of elliptical can do the job. So I guess it all depends on the context.
Yeah, for a trail runner living in a city, I was talking about it with Steve, our coach from New York City. Cross training is even more important, I think. It's a great alternative to just running on pavement most of the times, or in a city park, and you can actually do a lot of trail specific strength related type of work in the gym, or yeah, most likely in the gym, or like with different cross training activities. So if you're a trail runner and you live in a city, definitely consider incorporating more cross training to your normal routine.
Yeah, and this is a funny fact, but like I don't know if you know this, but like Claire Gallagher has been doing
Yeah.
like a deep dive, or like how do you call it when they go like super but the bottom basically of the sea, and
Oh
doing
yeah.
that as a cross. I mean, again, for her probably it's not cross training, but I found it curious, and I think I heard a podcast of her saying that it has helped her, mentally, being in this headspace, that it's, more open to kind of the whole challenge of doing an ultra, and like even breathing wise, how
Yeah.
it's now able to control herself better at some situations and stuff like that. So we're, of course, maybe talking about the more common, cross training activities, but I guess there are a long list of things that you could actually do in order to benefit from it.
Yeah, definitely. And even from the athletes that we coach, sometimes we get very interesting feedback about what they like doing, what they look, the options that they have available. Um, Maybe that type of cross training helps Claire even being more present to herself sometimes.
Yeah.
So mentally is, it's something that is very beneficial for her. And that's just another example of why and how cross training can be beneficial.
Yeah.
And then of course another very important chapter that I feel it's worth mentioning is cross training for recovering from an injury. It's probably the least enjoyable part of
Yeah.
training, but I've had to do it so much in my
Yeah,
athletic career,
for sure.
and I've
Eventually, the
become
runner
so
will
good at
have to
it.
come. Yeah.
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 So cross training is a great way to stay active, and also to have fun, because when you can't run for a long time, eventually you will feel like doing some kind of activity, and in the end you're also going to have fun riding or skiing or whatever you like. So it's important to always stay active no matter what.
Yeah.
You don't have to necessarily approach cross training with a super competitive mentality, meaning that you have to do workouts, you have to train and be in a certain way. You just have to stay active, basically. As a general, like a good idea is to trying to maintain like a training structure that is maybe similar to what you would do for running, meaning that maybe one or two intensity workouts per week will be beneficial, and then also a longer session, which can be backcountry skiing or on the bike for 2 or 3 hours or even more. But also, like, don't forget to recover. Definitely include easy days, include rest days, of course, include strength work in the gym. It all adds up. You don't have to worry much about your fitness when you're injured, I think, but it helps so much just staying active for when
Yeah.
you can run again.
Totally. I 100% agree. And again, it will help you physically to whenever you're
Yep.
ready to come back running, but also mentally, because I feel like if it comes to the point that you have an injury and you decide to just, go and take a break, like a full break, whenever you're ready to come back running, it will be so much harder to go out and, go for a run if you haven't been done anything at all. That if you have been, like you were saying, probably keeping some sort of a structure with 1 or 2 quality sessions a week plus something a little bit longer, it will make it way easier whenever you are ready to resume running. So I think it's also one of those things that mentally can always help you kind of seeing the bright side of things, because even if you're injured, if you're able to keep being active, and hopefully keep being outside, just, having fun, it will make the whole process of recovering from an injury way easier than if you're just, down at home just watching TV,
Yeah, of course. And you might discover some new things that you like, that you enjoy, that you can still keep in your normal training routine. So it's also a chance to learn, from every circumstance. There is always good and
Something
bad
good.
things,
Yeah.
and hopefully good lessons that you can draw. So
Yeah.
try to get the most out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
And also, I feel like it's important to mention, don't compare yourself too much with other people. Strava is great, but don't look at it too much, because everyone is different. What works for an athlete might not work for another athlete. This is related to running, but also cross training.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like it's just a good reminder in general.
For sure, I agree. And like with social media, like you were saying, like Strava, of course, you're seeing these monster sessions, like 5 hours on the hills, doing skimo, or like a 6 hour ride, and of course, for most people, that is unattainable on a weekly basis. So
It's not realistic, yeah.
it's not realistic at all. So yeah, you just have to find your balance and just, I think as long as you're, with a good mentality and keep being active, I think that'll just do, of course, if you can add a little bit of extra here and there, that would be even better. But like for most weeks, it'll just, help you having this structure, mentally and physically, for whenever you want to just come back to running full time.
Yeah, agree.
And yeah, as you were saying, maybe we talk a little bit about this, but I think the whole active recovery type of thing, it's really, undervalued for most people. Like a lot of people, they just don't see the value again in just doing cross training instead of an easy run. And I have come to know that, from experience, that it can definitely help a lot. And like for whenever, you are struggling to go for a run, and you're just taking forever to go outside, sometimes it's way easier to just jump on the bike and go and do whatever feels good, and then you will come back home feeling, grateful for just having been out there without forcing the running, especially after a hard session, or especially after, a long run and stuff like that, when sometimes you're physically and mentally just tired of running and you just want to do something else. So it's hard to keep that balance, because sometimes, of course, you have to be able to go for a run the next day of some of those sessions, but sometimes you don't, so you have to keep this balance. And that's why, coming with a program, having a coach is always very important, in order for you to find this equilibrium in between, when should be running instead of maybe riding, and the other way around too.
Yeah, 100% agree. Sometimes it's important to run on tired legs. Some other times it's completely pointless. That's why I was mentioning that in general, it's a good idea to substitute an easy or recovery run with cross training. Maybe not all the time though. And that balance is very individual. So that's why it's important to have a coach or someone to just talk to give you an advice, to give you
Some guidelines.
an
Yeah,
external perspective on what you're
exactly.
doing. Because sometimes if you're just by yourself, you don't realize maybe how
Yeah,
hard you're actually training, how
exactly.
high your mileage is. And an external view will open your eyes and make you realize, hey, you're actually pushing a little bit too much. Let's back off a little bit. You're gonna get better.
Yeah,
Especially if, like, when people, like, in general, when people are tired or overstressed from training, the solution is not to just push through and be stronger and go harder. It's to back off. It's the
yeah,
opposite.
yeah,
And it's so hard to realize if you don't have a coach. And
yeah.
I'm including myself in this
Especially
type
when you
of
compare, yeah, especially when you compare yourself with what are you seeing in the Strava and stuff like that, you
Exactly.
know, it's
Exactly.
so easy to overdo it. So yeah, I agree.
That is such a good reminder for myself, included. You know, that's why I still want to have a coach, even if I would probably be able to be self-coached. But this is external perspective is really, really valuable.
Yeah, I agree.
And a couple of other things that I wanted to mention. You know, cross training for recovery. That is a great like an important part, should be an important part of your training week. But also cross training for like a post race period. Like, you know, you might be racing a 50K or a 50 miler or whatever, like an ultra that is mentally and physically very demanding. Cross training is a great way to recover after a race for, you know, 2 or 3 weeks, just until you feel good again, until you feel ready to go. You don't have to restart training the week after or even the day after, of course. And cross training allows you to free your mind, relax your body, still be active, but recover, which is really, really important. Without recovery, there is no growth. So
Yeah.
it's an essential part of training.
I agree, and sometimes also you would see that you know, after a hard session or a long race, going for a super soft, like easy bike ride, it will actually make you feel better, you
Oh
know,
yeah, it clears the
because
lactate,
just, yeah, like
for
just the
example.
motion of just like riding your bike, it will help you out recovering faster. So
Yeah.
maybe it can be that you are tired mentally, but then physically going for a 30-minute easy spin will help you, you know, recovering 50% faster than if you wouldn't. So again,
Exactly.
that's one of those things that you have to know when to do it and when it's a good idea and when not it's a good idea. So but I also see a lot of value in how do you use cross training as an active recovery tool after one of these specific examples.
Very good point. Yeah. So maybe to kind of go towards the end of our conversation, what's your like typical experience with cross training? Like, how do you actually include it in your training week or training microcycle?
Yeah, I guess like first of all, I have to say, yeah, I am outdoors people, so I just enjoy being outside. Of course, I enjoy running the most, I think, but for me, just the pure fact of being out is super important on a daily basis. So I always kind of lean into that when it comes to picking what I'm going to do a given day. So if I'm training, let's say for a trail race, maybe not an ultra, but like a very specific type of race, I'm also very into, you know, running, meaning that when I'm running,
Yeah.
but I'm always, you know, kind of understanding that every now and then I do have to just, you know, pick my bike and go for a bike ride instead of a run, you know. And what I would say is the longer the race that I'm preparing, the more cross training I will add to my training on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm.
And this is because, as we were mentioning at the beginning, you know, the body doesn't really know what kind of a stress it's having. It just knows that it's getting stressed. So if I'm preparing myself for an ultra, instead of going for 2 runs a day, I would probably go for a run in the morning and an easy bike ride in the afternoon, for example. And that would be basically the same as just doing 2 easy runs, you know, on a day. And then when it comes to doing other type of cross training that I don't necessarily do for you know, training motives, it's like I do enjoy climbing. So it's one of those things that I have on and off periods of time.
Yeah.
Climbing is such a ungrateful sport, as I would like to say, because you know, you lose it very quickly. So most of the time, you know, you have the progression curve is like really steep, I guess. So for me, it's always hard when I stop climbing to resume climbing. But when I'm on, you know, I'm just climbing 3 or 4 times a week. Doesn't have to be anything hard, but just like to keep the consistency And I think that goes well with running because it also kind of helps you in terms of like, a little bit of strength, a little bit of stretching, you kind of do other sets of that
mobility,
motions and mobility things that you don't usually do while out there running. So that usually works well for me, but I don't do that steadily over the year. I would say the thing that I do the most steady over the year is running. So it's usually, running at the base layer, and then on top of that, I would either bike, I would either climb, and if you're in the winter, I will probably try to ski because I ski. Don't tell everybody this, but ski is my favorite sport in the world. So whenever I can ski, and do Eskimo, and I have done some Eskimo racing in the past, I would try to go and do more. But that's always kind of on top of running. So I would say that's like my usual type of cross training approach when it comes to the yearly base. But then on top of that, I will add, that as I mentioned at the beginning, I am just an outdoor person, and so I just love to being out. So whatever gets me out of the door on a hard day, I will just do that.
Exactly.
I just like to keep being active, keep being outdoor, and just keep enjoying the ability to just move by my own power. So
very important.
At the end of the day, it's just that.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Pick whatever activities you enjoy and just enjoy it and just go out and have fun, because after all, it's what matters.
So maybe to add to my thing, and this is something that we have talked about this in previous podcasts, and maybe we didn't touch a lot about this subject, but like strength training as a cross training too. I'm personally not good at that. I usually more reactive than proactive in the way that I tend to do a strength training when I'm feeling like I have my weakness popping up. So I'm trying to be more diligent in that front, meaning having some consistency. But I do feel and see a lot of value in being consistent with strength training, especially when you have been running for a while and you know for a fact that some parts of your body doesn't really, work as you would like to. So I'm usually coming back to, let's say, a set of exercise that I know will kind of keep me on track with my training running wise. So I think that is other really important component that as you start getting older, it becomes more and more important, So it's funny because, I tend to tell this to a lot of people that if you have a 60-minute window for doing, a run, I would do rather doing 45 to 50 minutes and then using the last 10 to do some stretching or some strength work. But I'm just struggling with that myself too. But that's like a constant reminder that I have to do because I do feel like it makes a difference. In the end of the day, it makes a difference for sure.
It does. Yeah, it does. It's what we encourage our athletes to do. I'm maybe a little more diligent than you, meaning that, I hit the gym, or I should say the pain cave, at least twice a week, and I'm pretty regular with it throughout the year, not just when I'm far from the races, but even as I get close to racing season. And like for me, running is generally like the baseline, what I enjoy the most and what makes the majority of my training volume. On top of that, I add, of course, strength work as the second most important activity. And then usually it's cycling for recovery purposes. I've tried to use cycling for strength, but I feel like it doesn't work as well as gym work, like specific exercises, which are a little more boring actually, but super, super beneficial. So I use the bike in general for recovery on a weekly basis, 1 or 2 sessions, especially in the summer. And that's when I'm healthy. If I'm not healthy, it's a lot more time on the bike and in the swimming pool, swimming or aqua jogging. So that opens up a whole new chapter. One other example that is can be maybe an inspiration to some people, and a really good example of how to combine cross training with running is Maud Matisse. Like I think what she did last year, being basically injured throughout the whole year, but still being able to perform so well, basically running like 2 or 3 hours per week and doing the rest with the bike or other types of course training is incredible, and shows that, you know, everyone can, you know, with the right approach, everyone is capable of doing great things, even if you're not running full time, basically.
Yeah, I was going to mention her example because it's super impressive, actually. And yeah, I guess it's one of those things that it's back off with science, with what you were saying at the beginning. And this is again an example of how a person you know can just be smart about her training and not overdoing the running. I mean, of course, in this case, I know it was because of an injury, but it can apply to both things in the way that if you're smart with your training, you know, you will probably achieve your goals anyway. So the ingredients can maybe change a little bit, but on the big picture, you know, if you just stay active and are able to be, you know, smart about how you approach your training, you know, you will be able to achieve your goals for sure.
Yeah. And also, like, you know, for different reasons, you might not be able to train the way that you've always been used to, because I don't know, you have an injury or you get a new job, so you have less time for running.
Yeah.
So cross training is always a chance. I see it as a chance to get better at something, even if you know, are not able to do things the way you did maybe
you used to
last year. Used to
exactly.
used to do. Cool. So maybe bottom line and summary, don't forget to run, of course, but don't forget that cross training can be a super useful resource that you can benefit from.
And maybe like from my last comment, maybe you have to find something that you really enjoy doing it beyond the benefits training wise. I mean, I know maybe for both of us, you know, going for a bike ride is pleasant, but I totally understand if somebody doesn't enjoy going for a bike ride because you don't have to. So maybe, you know, you have to, you know, find something that works for you. And it doesn't have to be either bike riding, planning, or going for skimo. You know, it can be something else. So in the end, it's about finding. It's like a good combination of finding what do you enjoy doing, but at the same time, what will probably bring you some benefits when it comes to your running. You know.
100% agree. Max, again, it's been a super insightful conversation with lots of great takes from your side, and hopefully some chances to learn something for our audience. So thank you again, and enjoy the trails, enjoy your cross training, whatever you're doing outside.
Yeah, thank you, Fran. Thanks for having me. And yeah, cross training is the best, man. Running and cross training is the perfect combination for sure.
All right. All the best. Have a nice one.
Ciao, ciao.